daft question.
Why is that a daft question?
I haven't indicated any admiration for the Ayatollah's regime.
My understanding, and you'll be closer to it than I.
Why would you,
my
as a senior
understanding is, and you'll be closer to ISA, Richard, there were people being killed.
Would you suggest that that's what?
Because if you let me answer, my understanding, and you're closer to it than I, is this is a regime that was killing certainly possibly 5,000, possibly 35,000 of his own people, and imprisoning thousands more. It was a regime that I would have thought needed to go. So I'm asking, what possibly could it be that you admired in that regime?
What you're about to hear is one of those moments where a media narrative completely falls apart. Live on air. It starts off sounding like a routine interview. A former British ambassador, someone with real, first-hand experience dealing with Iran, is brought in to discuss rising tensions and the criticism aimed at the UK government. But almost immediately something feels off. The questions aren't really about understanding the situation. They're framed in a way that pushes a very specific angle. You can sense it building, the attempt to paint hesitation as weakness and diplomacy as failure. And then it backfires. Instead of following that script, the ambassador calmly dismantles the entire premise. He points out that there were ongoing negotiations, serious diplomatic efforts that were cut short. Not because they failed, but because they were abandoned. And not by Iran. By decisions coming out of Washington and Tel Aviv. That changes everything. Because suddenly, the story being pushed, that military action was the only option, doesn't hold up anymore. What's being framed as strength starts to look more like impatience. And what's being dismissed as weakness begins to look like restraint. He goes further. He reveals something that rarely gets highlighted in mainstream coverage, the lack of strong public or political backing inside the United States itself. Lawmakers weren't fully convinced. The case for war wasn't clearly established. And now the messaging is shifting, quietly preparing the public for something longer, more complicated, and far less certain than originally presented. That's not confidence. That's adjustment. So when the UK, alongside countries like France and Germany, decides not to jump into the opening strikes, it isn't about weakness. It's about sticking to a position grounded in international law. But at that exact moment, pressure starts to build. Because the United States isn't just dealing with foreign policy, it's dealing with internal political tension. And when that pressure rises, it often gets redirected outward. That's what you're seeing here. And the ambassador's message is simple. Don't be swayed by that noise. Stay consistent. Stay grounded in law. Think long-term, not just in headlines. Because once decisions start being driven by pressure instead of principle, the consequences don't stay contained. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Who served as British ambassador to Iran and joins me now. The continuing, and I have to say, widespread criticism of Sir Keir Starmer in many of the newspapers' editorials this morning. So, Richard, how fair is that criticism in your view? Good morning.
It's unfair. There was a verbal negotiation which the Israelis and the United States aborted. Secondly, we've caught the Americans on the raw at a time when they're having great difficulty domestically with justifying this war. There is no majority in the United States for this war. There was clear indications from leaders of Congress after the briefing a few days before it was launched that there was no reason shown to them why there was a case for compelling reasons for the United States to go to war at this time. They're now soft-pedaling their regime change justification. They are now preparing their people for a long period of war against what the American people had a hope to expect. So when Britain confirms the position taken by France, Germany, and itself and all our other European partners not to participate in the opening strikes, this is a difficult moment for the Americans, and they're lashing out against us, and we should not be unduly impressed by it. We should stick to a course which is in accordance with international law, while at the same time assisting the United States. That is, in brief, what Prime Minister Starmer is doing.
So when it comes to defending UK citizens in the region, we don't even do it ourselves?
We are doing it.
We're not,
we
Sir
are
Richard.
assisting.
We're allowing US aircraft to do it.
We're actively assisting the United States in trying to destroy the Iranian missiles, which are raining down on.
But we didn't
the
even
Gulf
defend
states.
our own base in Cyprus, Sir Richard. We left that to the Americans as well. I mean, how impotent should the United Kingdom look in your view?
We're not looking impotent in the slightest. That was one small drone
which we didn't defend.
Launched by Hezbollah, and active steps were taken subsequently against the two drones that were directed at Akrotiri, which were successful. So we also have British planes in the skies assisting our partners in the Gulf to defend themselves against Iranian missiles. So the imputation that the UK is being weak is wrong.
When it comes to the Ayatollah and the now dead Ayatollah, what is it that gives you confidence that negotiations could have proceeded and come to fruition?
The clear statements by the Omani foreign minister who was mediating, and my own knowledge of the points which the Iranians were prepared to concede. These negotiations take time. Before they were aborted by Israel and the United States, many people pleaded for the United States to treat them seriously, but plainly they did not.
But what is it you admire most about the former Ayatollah's regime then?
What a daft question.
Why is that a daft question?
I haven't indicated any admiration for the Ayatollah's regime.
My understanding, and you'll be closer to it than I.
Why would you,
my
as a senior
understanding is, and you'll be closer to I, Sir Richard, there were people being killed.
Would you suggest that that's what
Because if you let me answer, my understanding, and you're closer to it than I, is this is a regime that was killing certainly possibly 5,000, possibly 35,000 of its own people, and imprisoning thousands more. It was a regime that I would have thought needed to go. So I'm asking, what possibly could it be that you admired in that regime?
There are a great many regimes around the world which need to go. But the important issue for Britain's national security is the framework set out after the end of the First World War to minimize the chances of the law of the jungle taking over from international law should be preserved. I'm afraid that our right-wingers, including Jeremy Hunt, are forgetting the lessons of the sacrifices of 20th century generations to try and prevent the law of strong powers overwhelming the rights of nations. And as a relatively weak power, United Kingdom security is dependent long-term on re-establishing the rule of law.
But
now,
lastly,
we didn't go in with the United States on Vietnam
No, indeed.
or on Somalia.
But I just
we didn't
wonder-
participate in the war of choice against Yemen. It's nothing extraordinary for us to take a different position from the United States. And the people who are panicking about it are the Americans,
But I wonder-
because it's their domestic political problem,
wonder-
which they fear we have exacerbated.
Lastly, I wonder, Sir Richard, the rules, as you rightly point out, that were established after the First World War, with players such as President Xi, the late Ayatollah, President Putin on the world stage, are those laws still applicable? Laws that came about more than 100 years ago?
Oh, come on. 100 years ago, in the course of human history, when human nature is what it is...
But obviously we didn't have a Putin, or we didn't have an Ayatollah, or we didn't have a Xi at those times.
We have had lots of them in the past, and it is wrong for us to think that just because we face a Trump and a Putin now, the laws which are there to protect small nations should somehow be jettisoned.
Okay.
The absence of a plan, Starmer was right to point out that. The absence of a legal base, he was right to point out that.
Grateful for your time. Thank you very much, Sir Richard Dalton. You served as British ambassador to Iran.
And then the interview takes a sharp turn, because when the argument starts slipping away, the strategy changes. Instead of debating policy, the focus shifts to something else entirely: emotion, outrage, and loaded assumptions. A question is thrown in, not to understand, but to provoke. What do you admire about the Ayatollah's regime? And just like that, the tone of the conversation drops. The ambassador immediately calls it out for what it is: a baseless and frankly absurd suggestion. Because at no point did he express admiration, not even close. But this is a classic move. When you can't win the argument on facts, you try to reframe your opponent as morally compromised. What follows is a barrage of claims about the regime, violent, extreme, and emotionally charged. And while those concerns may exist, they're being used here not to inform, but to corner. And the ambassador doesn't take the bait. Instead, he zooms out. He shifts the conversation away from outrage and back to principle. Back to something far more important, the role of international law. Because here's the bigger picture most people miss. There are many regimes around the world with serious issues, but global stability isn't maintained by picking and choosing when rules apply. It's maintained by having rules at all. That framework, built after the World War I, was designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. A world where powerful nations act without restraint. And the warning here is clear. If that framework collapses, what replaces it isn't justice. It's power, the law of the strongest. And for a country like the United Kingdom, that's not a game you want to play. He even reminds viewers that this isn't new. The UK has taken independent positions before, choosing not to follow the United States into certain conflicts. That's not weakness. That's sovereignty. But what's really happening beneath all of this? Pressure. Not just geopolitical pressure, but media pressure. Because figures like Donald Trump and allies in the broader right-wing ecosystem have been pushing a very specific narrative. Strength equals aggression, hesitation equals failure. And voices in the media echo that message daily. But this interview exposes something important: the gap between political messaging and geopolitical reality. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee.